What thing were you definitely not supposed to see? Story 1. I found my dad's will. I was on his computer while he was at work, actually searching for his porn, and ended up finding a strangely titled Word document. At first it didn't seem like a big deal. It contained a note to each of his kids. It wasn't until I got to the last one, my youngest brother, that I realized it wasn't just a will. The start of that line reads something along the lines of, if anything is going to make me change my mind now it's writing this part. I realized I had found my dad's suicide note. I was about 14 or 15 at the time and I had no idea how to go about talking to him about it. I decided to just keep it to myself. He started buying us gifts and stuff and I would get really scared and I still just kept it to myself. I remember one day on the weekend I woke up in my bed to a loud bang coming from my dad's room. I laid there in bed for probably half an hour frozen. Once I worked up the strength I went to his room and opened the door. He wasn't in the bedroom. I was so confused until I saw that the bedroom window was open. What had happened is that there was a gust and the wind had slammed the door shut, but my paranoid brain had heard a gunshot. After that I was laughing hysterically and I don't have much memory of the day past that. Shortly after this incident my dad had returned most of the gifts he bought us kids and I slowly started to believe that he had changed his mind. I never confronted him about it until last year, about 14 years or so later, but I never fully accepted that he was okay now. I called him distraught about a separate matter and he started talking to me about depression. He told me on his own about he had considered taking his life, and went into detail about it, and all I could do was cry and tell him, I know. We talked a lot longer after that and we were finally able to put it all to rest. Story 2. When I was 8 or so my old nanny/babysitter, choose which you prefer, was showing me a video of her time with her boyfriend in Paris. After it blacks out for a few seconds it then suddenly cuts to her lying on her hotel bed completely naked, legs spread, telling her boyfriend to come get it. She jumped out of her seat, tried to cover my eyes and told me to never tell anyone. I have now told potentially thousands of random strangers. Story 3. Growing up with my little brother and single mom we never had a lot, but she made sure we always had a safe and decent place to live and there was always food on the table. She never really ate much. I remember dinners of baked chicken, beef stew, salmon. It was a lot cheaper a million years ago, good food, nothing terribly extravagant, but always nutritious, yet she barely ever ate. When I was 10 I saw her eating PB&J on crackers in her room after dinner. That's when I realized there was never enough food for all three of us. She would cook what we had for my brother and I and she would eat the bare minimum, always out of sight, so that my brother and I wouldn't worry about the actual level of poverty we were at. I never asked for another material thing from her after that night. Story 4. After my little girl's mom and I split up and I had her most of the time, being an apprentice with stupid amounts of bills I'd only normally cook dinner for my little girl, then too, and I'd eat what she didn't. One night we had chicken bits I think. And I had a few and after I'd finished mine I looked at her eating hers and smiled at her, and she put some of hers onto my plate. I said, no you eat them, and she insisted. You sure little bug? What I call her, and she said, yes. You are my daddy. I almost cried. Makes my heart melt. Story 5. I was helping Mil cleaning out her closet. All was jokes and laughter until I pull out an unopened massive dildo. We were both paralyzed for a moment before she slowly took it out of my hands and mumbled something about the dildo not being what she thought it would be like and that she ordered it online. She then backed out of the room and threw it in a cupboard. We then proceeded to clean the rest of the closet. I desperately wanted to tell So about this awkward event but decided to spare him. Story 6. I was driving from West Berlin to West Germany in the late 1980s. My BF gives me wrong instructions so I have to take an exit off the Autobahn to turn back and get back to the correct exit. On the small country road on which we found ourselves, we see a large truck with a missile on it, surrounded by Russian soldiers. They were as surprised as we were, but just laughed and waved at us, as we got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. Story 7. My boss forwarded me an email telling me to do something. I noticed the email chain had his bosses on it so I read through the chain. They had asked him to rate all my coworkers and I from best to worst earlier in the conversation. Story 8. When I was in college I worked at an arcade/mini-golf joint that seemed to give zero fucks about actually making money, but was never in any kind of financial trouble. When I got hired, the owner literally said, I pay minimum wage and I expect to get minimum work for it. I worked the front counter, and collected money for the mini-golf and sold cups of coins, or you could just use the coin changer. The till was completely busted and would be off by $50 or more in either direction no matter what you did. I realized very quickly that I could just pretend to ring up golf fees and cups of tokens and pocket the cash, so I'd pocket $30 to $40 every shift, and nobody seemed to give a shit. One of the assistant managers let me take a break 20 minutes after I'd just taken a break because some of my friends had shown up and wanted to smoke a bowl with me. He was like, "That is totally more important than your job." It was awesome. Then one day I walked into the owner's office while his secretary was recording figures in the ledger. I can read upside down pretty well, and it was very obvious that the figures she was recording had fuck all to do with the business we were doing. We sold maybe $60 of golf fees a night, and maybe $100 in coin cups, but she was recording $600 and $1,000 for each. I commented on the discrepancy and quipped about how someone would think we were in the laundry business, and she got really squirrely and told me to leave the office. The next day the owner called me into his office and we had a very circumspect conversation about how much I was enjoying working there and enjoying the perks of the job, and I very much got the sense that he was trying to decide if I was going to tell anyone anything. Apparently he decided I wasn't, and so I kept working there. About a year later the owner was arrested for money laundering and we all got fired. Still the best job I ever had. The mob is an A+ employer, would work in fake business again. Story 9. I used to do a little work after school at a local comic shop. One day after school I was bagging comics when the owner's buddy came in. "Look at these. Came out great." He had a stack of glossy amateur porn, featuring the shop owner, his buddy, and the owner's wife fucking. He laid them out all over the counter and they started pawing through the stack excitedly. From what I could see it looked like the three of them enjoyed one another's company equally and vigorously. Then they noticed I was there. I got sent home early with a stack of free comics. Story 10. Late to this one, but I once walked into my dad's van while he was balls deep into a woman who was not my mom. Dad had a drinking problem. Mom took me and my brother to go looking for him because he was supposed to be buying Christmas presents. Found his van at a bar. Mom sent me to look inside the van to see if there were presents in there. Looked back into the back and saw my dad's bare ass as he was plowing some chick. He turned over his shoulder and looked right at me and said in the most evil voice, "Get out." This was 20+ years ago now and I still get emotional thinking about it. I still remember the entire thing so clearly. Story 11. Not me but a coworker several months before I started at the company. Big boss man comes back from a site visit/weekend at his cabin not too far from site. Has someone burn all photos from his camera to a CD and makes a couple of copies. One copy is with my coworker and another guy looking at photos from site. Suddenly the photos of the site trip ends and there are topless photos of Big Boss Man's wife at their cabin on the disc. But wait, there's a twist. Another copy of the same set of photos was currently in the boardroom PC where Big Boss Man is showing photos to the client. My coworker doesn't know what to do, tells our lead administrative assistant. She confidently marches into the boardroom and ejects the disc, interrupting the meeting. Big Boss Man asks, "What are you doing?" She simply says, "There's a problem with the disc," and leaves. Story 12. I was about 8 or 9 and my parents were going to be out of town, so they had me and siblings stay with a family from our church. Once we got to the house, which was really nice by the way, they had one rule: you can play wherever you want but the basement is off limits. Me being the little bastard that I was, snuck down there first chance I got and was supremely disappointed to only find rows and rows of plants growing under lights. Story 13. Went to a coworker's house to help get the scanner to work, which hasn't worked since her daughter had tried to use it a few days earlier. I tried to load the software, which would hang while trying to connect to the scanner. A quick power cycle of the scanner, and the software loaded. The software defaulted to the recent scans screen. The most recent scan was the genitalia of my coworker, her daughter, or I suppose it could have been a page from a XXX magazine that just happened to be exactly what you'd see if you were squatting over a scanner. My hotkey skills were fast, so I may have Alt+F4 before she saw what I did, but once that software worked, I used a different program to perform a test scan. Easy, but uncomfortable way to earn $20. Story 14. Saw a Homer Simpson keychain in my mom's desk drawer. Didn't say anything. 2 weeks later it's in my Christmas stocking and she goes, "Wow, how did Santa know how much you like The Simpsons?" That's how I figured out Santa must have been sleeping with my mom. Story 15. My dad once handed me his tablet and suggested I look at an ebook or something, while we were sitting around in a theater waiting for a play to start. I don't know if I misunderstood him or what, because when I brought up his Amazon Reader app, I saw that the last book he had been reading was How to Deal with a Sexless Marriage or something along those lines. Dad was very embarrassed, quickly took the tablet back, and we did not speak of what had just transpired. Another time, Dad handed me his phone and asked me to look up something for him, while we were sitting around the living room at a family get-together. When I opened his browser app, the last page open was porn. The video began autoplaying and I frantically tried to figure out how to close the tab, but all I really managed to do was look at the video for far longer than I wanted to. So I shoved the phone back at my dad and said, "You need to close the tab, I can figure out though, I'm sorry," and we once again did not speak of what had just transpired. There were also another couple of times where I went to use his computer and there was either a bunch of porn open in his browser or some kind of porn in the CD tray. Dad is a bit absent-minded. Story 16. User Avatar. Level 1. The Gawking. 6 years ago. More heard than seen, but I was golfing with my mother's fiancé when he got a phone call. He had his cell volume turned up really high, and I overheard a woman who wasn't my mother say some things, including the phrase, "fuck and suck," in a seductive manner. I convinced myself that it wasn't my business, or that I'd misunderstood, and dropped it. A few years later, her now husband was revealed to be a serial cheater, with active partners numbering in the dozens. Yes, I still feel like shit. Yes, they're divorced. Story 17. Alright, here it goes. I was in the 7th grade, so I was almost 12. I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard my mom screaming. I jump up and get ready to defend my mom. I open up my parents' bedroom door and my mom was definitely not in trouble. My dad was taking her from the behind. I didn't understand it at the time, but I wanted to get out of there before they noticed me. However, I fainted instead. That, my friends, is something I was definitely not supposed to see. Forever scarred. I'm 25 now and my dad still likes to bring it up at Christmas dinner. Story 18. When I was 14, a friend hosted a birthday party at his house with all the parents invited. Needed to use the restroom, but the main one was occupied, so my friend told me I can use the one in his mom's bedroom. As I walked up to the door I could hear somebody in there, so I decided to wait until whoever was in there was finished. A good 10 minutes later, my friend's mom, who was hosting the party, and another good friend's stepfather walk out and see me standing there all confused. They asked what I was doing there and I just said I was waiting to use the bathroom. Surprisingly, they played it cool and just said I can use it now and walked off. Story 19. Our cat was a little late coming home one evening, unusual for him. I went looking for him, calling his name, not massively loudly as it was late at night in a built-up area. As I walked around a corner to a car park, there he was. He looked like he was just having a bit of a chat with a fox. They looked relaxed, facing each other, sitting and chilling out. I called his name and he looked at me, seemed flustered, looked back at the fox then me almost as if he was saying, "He's not with me, I don't know him." I called him again and he chased the fox into the bushes before trotting over to me. I'm sure I crossed an animal line. Story 20. I worked at FedEx Express when I was getting my bachelor's degree. Was one of the first people there every morning since I was a handler and would help unload our giant metal cans off of a semi. Each can was stuffed full of packages. Well, I would set up a scanner in order to scan damaged packages so our station wouldn't get charged for it since it was damaged before it arrived. One morning my manager, who was an alcoholic and a pill head, had me scan these large bags going to the VA, said it was in case shit was missing. These bags were closed with a Velcro strap around the top so they weren't very secured. These giant bags were full of pills and it never occurred to me that anything was wrong. Well, one morning I arrived a little earlier than normal and was setting stuff up when I heard a tearing sound. It WSS Velcro coming apart. I didn't think anything about it and kept working. After about 5 minutes I heard a thud and looked up to see that manager come around the corner of the can and place a VA bag back onto the ground and walk off. He didn't notice I was there since I was in between two trucks in the warehouse. After seeing that it made sense why he wanted me to scan the bags now. The fucker was and had been stealing pain medication out of the Veterans Hospital's bags and using them for his own addiction. I brought it up to a coworker that had worked there forever, in which she told me to just ignore it unless I had hard evidence like a video or actually see him digging in the bag. If I had anything less and accused him of it, I'd surely be fired since HR gave zero shits about its employees and only protected the managers. Story 21. My 6-year-old cousin asked me if I wanted some chewing gum. I said sure, if she has some. She then goes to her mother's purse and takes out 2 packages of condoms and asks me, "What do you want, strawberries or banana?" Next thing I know, I'm shoving Durex packages in her mother's purse saying, "We should firstly ask your mom before going through her things." So the kid doesn't stop here. She takes the purse, goes in the kitchen where all the family was reunited and asked her mother, "Mom, can I have some gum?" Her mom says she doesn't have any. The freakin' girl takes the condoms out of the purse and says, "Sure you do, I want the strawberries ones please." Imagine her mother's embarrassment. Story 22. One Christmas Eve I couldn't sleep at all, so I went to the kitchen to get some water or something, and out in the living room were my parents setting out presents and eating the cookies I had left out. They said that Santa was running late and was in such a big hurry that he just dropped off the presents and asked them to put them out for him. Story 23. In middle school we had a class trip to the countryside where we stayed at a fancy historical manor. There were about 50 students and 5 chaperones present. The boy/girl ratio was roughly the same, so we basically divided the manor into the boy and girl halves, each with chaperones. One of the nights I got up to go to the bathroom and had walk across a long hallway which had lots of windows. From a certain point I could see into the room where one of the female chaperones slept. She wasn't super hot or anything, but she was reasonably attractive and fairly young. I saw her looking out of the window and smoking a cigarette while she was topless. This was the first time in my life I've seen real-life boobies, so I just stood there transfixed. She couldn't see me because the hallway was totally dark, so she just kept on smoking and being lost in thought. One of the male chaperones heard me leave, so after a while he got worried that maybe I got lost or was trying to sneak into the girl's half. He came looking for me, and when he found me in the hallway he also saw her just standing there. We both exchanged looks. He grinned and said, "Wow." I then proceeded to use the bathroom and went back to bed. On my way back she had already retreated into her room. Of course, being a middle school boy, I told all my friends the following morning, but at the request of the male chaperone I left out the part where he also saw her. I became an instant hero and was made to retell the story in extreme detail for days to come. The following night a few of the boys tried sneaking out to get a peek, but the male chaperone was probably expecting this and basically made sure we just went to the bathroom and weren't idling around to catch a peep. Story 24. A long-time friend of mine's dad was showing me pics of a car he was restoring. He accidentally pulled up nude pics of my friend's mom instead. He looked awkward for a minute. He never said anything and then just started looking at car pics like it never happened.